The wolf was dying. Kate knew it the moment she heard the sound. Not a howl, not a growl, but something between the two, low and broken, like a creature that had forgotten how to ask for help. She stopped in the middle of the frozen path, her lantern swinging in the wind, and listened. The forest around Ashvale was not a kind place after dark. Everyone in the pack knew that. The elders said the pines held old shadows, that the cold that came down from the northern ridge carried more than just ice. Kate had grown up with those stories the same way she had grown up with everything else in this village, quietly, in the background, never quite belonging. She should have kept walking. Her boots were already soaked through, and the bundle of firewood on her back had rubbed her shoulders raw. The 2 pups were waiting at home. Little Finn, barely 4 years old, would be sitting by the cold hearth, with his knees pulled to his chest, trying not to shiver. Mara, who was 6 and already fiercer than most grown wolves Kate knew, would be pretending she was not afraid of the dark. Kate should have kept walking. She didn't. The sound came again, closer this time, and she pushed through a low curtain of pine branches and found him. He lay in a hollow between 2 roots, his massive body curled in on itself. Dark fur matted with blood that had already begun to freeze at the edges. Even collapsed, even still, there was something about the size of him that made the air feel smaller. His ribcage rose and fell in shallow, uneven pulls. One enormous paw was extended toward her, not reaching, just resting there, as if even in unconsciousness some part of him had been trying to move forward. Kate crouched down and held her lantern close. The wounds were deep. 3 long gashes across the flank, another across the shoulder. Whatever had done this had been trying to finish something. The wolf's breathing was labored, his dark eyes closed, the silver streaks along his muzzle catching the lamplight like frost on iron. She should have been afraid. She pressed her hand against his side and felt the faint, stubborn beat of his heart. Still there, she thought, stubborn enough to still be there. "All right," she said quietly, to herself, to the frozen dark, to no one in particular. "All right." Getting him to the cottage was the hardest thing Kate had done in a life that had not been short on hard things. She could not carry him. No one could have carried him, not a man twice her size. But she had the rope she always kept coiled at her belt, a habit her grandmother had taught her, and she had the harness she used for hauling timber, and she had the particular stubbornness that the women of Ashvale had always quietly mocked her for. She worked in the dark and the cold, looping and tying, speaking low to keep him calm as she worked, though she was not sure he could hear her. Her breath came in white clouds. Her fingers went numb twice, and she had to press them under her arms to bring feeling back before she could continue. By the time she dragged him through the snow to her door, the lantern oil was nearly gone. Mara was awake. Of course she was. The girl stood in the doorway with Finn asleep against her shoulder, one small hand twisted into Mara's sleeve, and she looked at the massive wolf in the snow, and then up at Kate with an expression that was not fear, but something more careful than that. "He's hurt," Kate said, because that was the only thing that needed to be said. Mara stepped aside. The cottage was small. It had been small for Kate alone. It was smaller still with 2 children who had arrived at her door 7 months ago, with nothing but the dirt on their faces and a piece of cloth with their names written in their mother's handwriting, as if she had planned for this, as if she had known she would not be coming back. No one in the pack had wanted them. Kate had not thought about it for very long. She had simply opened the door. The pack had not been kind about it. Old Hessa, who had 3 daughters and 2 sons of her own, and had never gone a winter without enough wood, had said it plainly at the market one morning. "You can barely feed yourself, Kate. What do you think you're doing?" The others had not been much gentler. Whispers behind hands. A certain way of looking past her when she passed. The pack tolerated her. She was useful enough. She knew plants and remedies, and she did not cause trouble. But they had never thought much of her, and taking in 2 children who were not hers had only given them more to say. Kate had stopped listening. She cleared a space on the floor near the hearth and built the fire higher than she should have, given the wood supply, and she worked through the night cleaning and binding the wolf's wounds with the same steady hands she used for everything else. Mara stayed awake beside her, passing cloth and water without being asked, and Kate did not tell her to go to sleep, because she understood that Mara needed to be useful the same way Kate did. By the time the sky began to lighten, the wolf's breathing had steadied. Kate sat back on her heels and looked at him. Truly looked, now that the crisis had eased. He was extraordinary, even like this. The size alone was impossible. Broader across the chest than any wolf she had ever seen, and the silver at his muzzle was not age. She could see that clearly now. It was something else. A mark, almost. A distinction. She had heard stories. Everyone in Ashvale had heard stories. She pushed the thought away and went to check on the children. He was conscious by mid-morning. Kate knew before she turned around. She felt the change in the room, a stillness that had not been there before, the particular quality of air when something powerful is watching you. She turned slowly, keeping her hands visible, keeping her voice calm. His eyes were open. Dark gold, she saw now, ringed with something deeper, and they were fixed on her with an intensity that would have sent most people stepping back. Kate stood her ground. She had learned a long time ago that ground, once given, was rarely returned. "You're safe," she said. "Your wounds are bound. You lost a great deal of blood, and you'll need to stay still." He said nothing. His gaze moved across the room, the low ceiling, the herbs hanging from the rafters, the 2 small shapes asleep in the corner under a pile of blankets. When his eyes came back to her, something in them had shifted. "You dragged me here," he said. His voice was rough, unused, like a door that had not been opened in a long time. It was not a question. "You were dying in the snow," Kate said simply. "You could see what I was." "Yes. And you dragged me here anyway." Kate looked at him steadily. "You had a heartbeat." That was enough. Something moved across his face, too quick to name, there and gone like a shadow passing over stone. "Do you know," he said slowly, "what it means to help a wolf who is being hunted?" Kate had thought about this through the long cold hours of the night. She had thought about it while she cleaned his wounds, and while she watched his breathing even out, and while she sat in the dark and listened to the forest outside her thin walls. "I know what it means to leave someone to die in the cold," she said. "I've always thought that was the worst risk." He was quiet for a long moment. "What is your name?" he asked at last. "Kate." He closed his eyes. Whether it was pain or exhaustion or something else entirely, she could not tell. "You should know," he said, very quietly, "that the people who hunted me will come looking." Kate looked at the door. She looked at the 2 children sleeping in the corner. She looked at the wolf on her floor, at the wounds she had spent the night closing, at the heartbeat that was still, stubbornly, impossibly, there. "Then I suppose," she said, and turned back to the fire. "We had better be ready." Outside, the wind picked up. Snow tapped against the shutters like fingers, patient and insistent. Somewhere in the deep pine forest beyond Ashvale, something moved through the dark, something deliberate and cold and not yet finished. Word count: 1,412. I've reached 1,412 words on this block. Let me complete it to reach the required 1,802,000 before asking your authorization. The morning passed quietly, which Kate did not trust. Quiet in Ashvale always meant something. The village had a way of knowing things before it should. News traveled through it the way cold traveled through old walls, finding every crack, settling in every corner. By the time Kate went to draw water from the well at midday, she could feel it. The looks that lasted a half-second too long. The way conversation paused and restarted as she passed. Someone had seen her last night. She filled her bucket and walked back without hurrying. Hurrying would have told them something. Mara was sitting in the doorway when she returned, whittling a stick with the small knife Kate had taught her to use. She looked up with the particular expression that meant she had been thinking very hard about something for a long time. "He woke up again while you were gone," Mara said. "Did he speak to you? He asked where you were." A pause. "He didn't ask about anything else." Kate went inside. He was watching the door, had been watching it, she suspected, the entire time she was gone. His wounds would not allow him to move much, but he had managed to shift position slightly, placing himself with a better view of the room's entrance. Even injured, even reduced to lying on a cottage floor, the instinct was undeniable. He was assessing, positioning, preparing. Whoever he is, Kate thought, he has never in his life been someone who waits to be defended. "The village knows something is different," she said, setting the bucket down. "They don't know what yet. We have perhaps a day before someone comes to ask. And when they ask, I'll answer what I choose to answer." She began ladling water into the pot over the fire. "What I need to know is whether the people hunting you will come here openly or quietly." A pause. She did not turn around. "Openly," he said finally. "They will want witnesses." That was a specific answer. It told her several things. She filed them away. "Then I need to know your name," she said. "Not because I'll use it. Because if I'm going to stand between you and something coming, I need to understand the size of what's coming." The fire crackled. Finn made a small sound in his sleep and turned over, one arm flopping out from beneath the blankets. The wolf's gaze moved to the child for a moment, something unreadable crossing his face, before returning to Kate. "Sebastian," he said. Kate kept her hand steady on the ladle. She did not let her breath change. She knew that name. Every pack in the Northern Territory knew that name. Every elder who had ever sat at a fire and spoken of the old order, the old bloodlines, the compact that had held the wolf clans together for generations. They all knew that name. Children learned it before they learned the names of their own grandparents. Sebastian Vane, the Alpha King. Kate set the ladle down very carefully. "All right," she said, exactly as she had said it last night in the frozen dark, to herself and no one, and nothing in particular. She turned around and looked at him, at the wolf lying on her cottage floor, bleeding through her linen bandages, watching her with those dark gold eyes that had seen, she now understood, more than she could probably imagine. "All right," she said again. "Then we had better be very ready." Outside, the wind had dropped. The snow had stopped falling. The forest beyond Ashvale stood perfectly, completely still, which was, Kate knew, far more frightening than any storm. By the second morning, Sebastian could sit upright. Kate watched him do it from across the room, noting the way he measured the pain before he moved, not flinching from it, not ignoring it, but accounting for it the way a man accounts for weather before a journey. Deliberate, precise. She recognized that quality. It was the same thing she did every morning when she calculated what was left in the grain sack and what the children would need before she thought about what she herself might eat. He caught her watching and said nothing. Neither did she. Finn had decided, with the absolute certainty that only small children possess, that Sebastian was not frightening. He had reached this conclusion sometime in the night, and had apparently seen no reason to revisit it. He was now sitting approximately 3 feet from the Alpha King, dragging a carved wooden horse back and forth across the floor planks, narrating its journey in a low, serious murmur that required no audience but tolerated one. Sebastian watched the boy the way Kate imagined a man might watch something he had no name for. Not coldly, not warmly, but with a kind of focused attention that suggested he was trying to understand something that his experience had not prepared him to understand. Mara, characteristically, had not decided anything yet. She stayed near the hearth, doing useful things, stirring the morning porridge, refilling the water jug, keeping her hands busy, and watching Sebastian from beneath her dark lashes with the careful patience of someone who had learned not to trust quickly and had very good reasons for it. Kate understood Mara perfectly. The knock came mid-morning, 3 sharp raps that echoed in the small space. Kate was already at the door before the 3rd knock finished. She opened it 6 inches and held it there with her shoulder, a posture that was welcoming enough not to give offense, and firm enough to make a point. It was Edric. He was the pack's second, not the alpha, but close enough to it that the distinction rarely mattered in daily life. He was a broad man, gray at the temples now, with the kind of face that had been handsome once, and had settled into authority instead. He looked at Kate, the way he always looked at Kate, with the mild, slightly impatient expression of someone tolerating a situation they find mildly absurd. "There are tracks," he said. No greeting. He had never bothered with greetings for her. "Coming from the North Ridge, very large. They end at your door." "The forest has many animals," Kate said. "Kate." "Edric." He looked at her for a long moment. Behind her, the cottage was quiet. She had positioned herself to block his sight line, and she was grateful that Finn had apparently sensed the shift in atmosphere and gone silent. "If you are sheltering something dangerous," Edric said, dropping his voice slightly, though the flatness in it did not change, "you are putting those children at risk. Whatever you think you're doing." "I think I am doing exactly what I have always done," Kate said. "Exactly what this pack chose not to do. I'm keeping someone alive." A muscle moved in Edric's jaw. He looked past her, or tried to. She held the door steady. "The children are fine," she said. "The fire is warm. I have nothing that belongs to the pack, and I am asking nothing from the pack. Is there something else?" The silence between them was the particular kind that holds many things that will not be said. "There were riders through Ashvale at dawn," Edric said finally. His voice had changed slightly, still flat, but with something beneath it that Kate thought, with some surprise, might be genuine warning. 6 of them, armed. They asked if anyone had seen a lone wolf moving through the valley. Kate kept her face still. "What did you tell them?" "I told them nothing useful." A pause. "That may change, depending on what you tell me." It was the most honest thing Edric had said to her in years. She recognized it as such, and gave it the weight it deserved. "Give me 2 days," she said quietly. He studied her. The wind moved between them, cold and sharp, carrying pine resin and wood smoke. "1," he said, and walked away. She closed the door and stood with her back against it for a moment, eyes closed, counting her own heartbeats until they settled. 6 riders. Sebastian's voice came from across the room, low and even. Kate opened her eyes. He had moved, only slightly, only enough to have heard the conversation clearly, but the movement had cost him. She could see it in the tight set of his jaw. "You heard." "I hear most things." His gaze was steady on her. "You bought us a day. You didn't have to." "I don't do things I don't have to do," Kate said, moving to check his bandages. "It would have been easier to tell him nothing and let whatever comes, come. I made a choice." She began unwinding the outer layer of linen. The wound beneath was angry still, but cleaner than she had feared. "I need you to tell me about those riders." Sebastian was quiet for a moment. Mara appeared silently at Kate's elbow with fresh cloth, and Kate took it without comment. This small, wordless coordination, Kate had noticed that it had begun to register on Sebastian's face in a way he was clearly not accustomed to. "They serve my brother," he said at last. Kate's hand stilled for just a moment, then continued. "Dorian," Sebastian said. The name came out stripped of almost everything, not bitter, not angry, just bare. "He has been working toward this for 2 years, removing the people close to me, questioning my decisions before the council, and 3 nights ago, he made his move." Something shifted in his expression. Not pain exactly, but the shadow pain leaves behind. He had allies I did not know about. I underestimated the depth of it. And the wounds? I fought my way out. He paused. Barely. Kate finished rebinding his shoulder and sat back. Mara drifted back to the hearth. Finn had started his horse's journey again. The soft wooden sound a strange, ordinary counterpoint to everything else in the room. "Your brother wants you dead," Kate said. "Not a question. He wants the seat," Sebastian said. "I am simply what stands between him and it." "Is there anyone who knows you survived?" "If there were," he said quietly, "they would already be here." The word they landed with a particular weight. Kate heard everything inside it, the loyalty he was describing, and the absence of it. "Then right now," she said, "the only people who know you're alive are in this room." Sebastian looked at her, then at Mara, who was stirring porridge and pretending not to listen, then at Finn, who had stopped his horse's journey and was looking up at Sebastian with the direct, uncomplicated curiosity of a child who has not yet learned that some things should be feared. "Yes," Sebastian said. "It appears so." Finn held up the wooden horse. "Do you want to see my horse?" he asked Sebastian with complete seriousness. Something happened to Sebastian's face then. A shift so small that Kate almost missed it, a fracture in the stone, gone before it fully formed. "Yes," he said, just as seriously. "I would." That evening, when the children were asleep and the fire had burned low, Kate sat at the table with a candle and thought through everything she knew, which was not enough, and everything she had, which was also not enough, and what she intended to do anyway. She had done this before. Every time she had made a choice the pack considered foolish. Taking Mara and Finn in, staying in this village when leaving might have been simpler. Building a life from what most people would have considered nothing. She had sat at this table and gone through the same inventory. What she had, what she lacked, what she was willing to risk. The answer had always come to the same place. She was willing to risk a great deal for the things that mattered. She heard Sebastian shift on his pallet near the fire and glanced over. His eyes were open, watching the ceiling. "You should sleep," she said. "I don't sleep easily in unfamiliar places. You slept for nearly a full day when you arrived." That was blood loss. A brief pause, and something in it that might, in another voice, have been dry humor. "It's different." Kate looked at him for a moment. The candle threw long shadows across the room. The wind outside had picked up again, moving through the pines with that low, persistent sound that never quite resolved into silence. "Tomorrow," she said, "I need you to tell me everything about your brother. Who he trusts, who he fears, how he thinks." She paused. "If we're going to get you out of this, I need to understand the shape of what's against us." Sebastian turned his head to look at her. In the low light, she could not read his expression clearly. "You said us," he observed. "I did. Why?" Kate considered this. The honest answer was not simple. It involved everything she understood about what it meant to leave someone in the cold, and what it cost, and why she had never been able to do it, not once, not ever, even when it would have been far more practical. "Because I already dragged you through the snow," she said finally. "It would be wasteful to stop now." Sebastian was quiet for a long moment. "Get some rest, Kate," he said at last. She blew out the candle. In the dark, the forest waited, and somewhere beyond the tree line, 6 riders had made camp for the night. But they would not stay camped for long. The village came to her on the 3rd day. Not all of it. Not the way a mob comes, loud and decided. It came the way Ashvale always did things, in small clusters, with careful faces and words arranged to sound reasonable. First it was old Hessa, who arrived at Kate's door with a covered basket and an expression of concern so practiced it had worn grooves into her face. "We're worried about you, dear," Hessa said, her eyes moving past Kate's shoulder with the determined casualness of someone trying very hard to appear as though they were not looking for something. "2 children is already so much. People are saying you've taken in a stray, a large one." "People say a great many things," Kate said pleasantly. "Kate." Hessa lowered her voice, the basket shifting in her grip. "There were riders again this morning, at the eastern road. Armed men asking questions and not being gentle about the asking." She paused, and for just a moment the practiced concern cracked slightly, and something more genuine showed through. "Whatever you have in that cottage, it is drawing dangerous attention to Ashvale. The council is meeting tonight." Kate received this the way she received most things Hessa said, filtering it for the information beneath the performance. Riders again. Eastern Road this time, not the northern approach. They were widening their search. "Thank you for telling me," Kate said, and gently closed the door. She told Sebastian immediately. He was on his feet, which he should not have been, and which she noted with the particular exasperation of someone whose careful work is being undone, standing at the small window with the shutter cracked, looking out at the lane. He had pulled on the shirt she had washed and dried for him, and in the pale morning light she could see how the wounds pulled when he moved, a tightness across his left side that he was controlling with the same deliberate discipline he applied to everything. "Eastern Road," he said when she finished. "You already knew." "I heard horses at first light." He turned from the window. "Dorian is not being subtle. He wants the search visible. He wants people frightened enough to talk." "It's working," Kate said. "The council meets tonight. Edric gave us 1 day and that day is gone." Sebastian looked at her steadily. "I can move. If I leave tonight." "You cannot move," Kate said flatly. "Not through the northern ridge, not in the condition you're in. You would be dead before you cleared the tree line, and then everything would have been for nothing." She said it without particular emotion, the way she said most true things. "So we need another way." Sebastian closed his mouth. He looked, briefly, like a man unaccustomed to being interrupted mid-argument and uncertain how to proceed. Mara, who was mending a tear in Finn's sleeve by the hearth, said without looking up, "There's the old shepherd's track, behind the mill. It doesn't go through the ridge. It curves west, below the frost line. Comes out near the Dellen Valley." Both adults turned to look at her. Mara kept her eyes on her mending. "I used to know someone who used it," she said carefully, in the tone of a child who has learned to offer information without offering the story behind it. "It takes longer, but riders on horses can't use it. Too narrow." Kate looked at Sebastian. Sebastian looked at Mara with that same focused, nameless attention he had been directing at the children since he arrived, as though they were presenting him with information about the world that his previous life had somehow failed to include. "How do you know that track?" Kate asked gently. Mara's needle moved through the fabric. "My mother knew it," she said, and did not say more. Kate did not push. She turned back to Sebastian. 2 more days. If your wounds hold, if the bleeding doesn't return, 2 days, and you could manage that track. 2 days is a long time with riders in the valley." "Yes," Kate agreed. "It is." She sat down at the table and pulled the candle close, even though it was daylight. It was a habit. The light helped her think. "So we need to give the riders something. not you, but something that makes them look in a different direction long enough for us to move." Sebastian was quiet for a moment. Then, "You have a talent for this." Kate glanced up. For what? For thinking through problems without flinching at the shape of them. She looked at him for a moment, reading his expression. There was no flattery in it. He was simply observing, the way he observed everything. Directly, without decoration. "I've had a great deal of practice," she said, and turned back to the candle. The council meeting that night was everything Kate had expected. She went because not going would have been its own kind of statement, and she needed to understand the room. She left Mara in charge of the fire and the door, and gave her a look that communicated several things at once, all of which Mara received and acknowledged with a small nod. The meeting hall smelled of pine resin and tallow candles, and the specific tension of people who have convinced themselves they are being reasonable. 12 members of the Pack's council sat at the long table. Edric was at the head. He looked at Kate when she entered, and his expression shifted almost imperceptibly, something between relief and wariness, which she found interesting. Old Brennan spoke first, as he always did, because he had been speaking first in this hall for 40 years and had confused the habit with the right. He laid out the situation in the measured tones of a man who had already decided the conclusion and was walking everyone toward it. There was something in the village, something that had drawn armed outsiders to Ashvale. The Pack's safety required that the matter be resolved. If Kate was sheltering an unknown wolf, a stray, a rogue, something with enemies, then the Pack could not be responsible for the consequences. "We are not asking you to leave," Brennan said, looking at Kate with the careful kindness of someone about to ask exactly that. "We are asking you to make a responsible choice." Kate let the silence sit for a moment after he finished. "The riders came from the east this morning," she said. "Yesterday they came from the north. They are not converging on Ashvale because something is here. They are moving through the valley on a broad search." She paused. "If we hand them anything, anyone, we confirm that we have been hiding something. We become worth questioning, and men who ride armed through villages asking questions in that particular way are not men who stop at one answer." The silence in the room was different after that. Edric had not spoken. He was watching Kate with an expression she could not fully read. Attention, she thought. Real attention, maybe for the first time. "What are you proposing?" he asked. 2 days, Kate said. "Give me 2 days and this leaves Ashvale quietly, without anyone being able to say it was ever here." "And if the riders return before 2 days?" Brennan asked. "Then I will handle it," Kate said, "without involving the Pack." Another silence. She held it, the way she held the door, steady, giving nothing extra. 2 days, Kate," Edric said at last. His voice was not warm, but it was not the voice he usually used with her either. It was the voice he used with people he was taking seriously. "Not an hour more." She was halfway home when she heard the footsteps behind her. Quick ones. Light. She turned to find one of the younger council members, Petra, barely 25, who had always been slightly kinder to Kate than the others without being able to explain why, catching up to her on the dark path. "The men who came through," Petra said, slightly breathless. "The riders. I heard them speaking to each other before they rode on." She glanced back toward the hall, then at Kate. "They weren't asking about a stray. They used a title." She hesitated. "They said the king." Kate kept her face entirely still. "I thought you should know," Petra said. And then quietly, "Whatever you're doing, Kate, be careful." She turned and walked back before Kate could respond. Kate stood in the dark path, the cold settling around her, the pine trees motionless in the still air. The king. They had not said a wolf. They had said the king. which meant they knew exactly what they were looking for, which meant Dorian was not simply searching, he was announcing. He was telling every pack in the valley that Sebastian was gone, that the old order was broken, that whatever came next would be decided by the man sending riders through the dark. Kate walked home faster. Sebastian saw her face when she came through the door. "What happened?" he said immediately. Kate latched the door, checked the shutter, turned around. "They know what you are," she said. "Not just who, what. Dorian has been announcing your disappearance. He's not searching quietly anymore." She met his eyes. "He's already telling people you're gone. He's moving to take your seat." Something passed through Sebastian's expression. Something deep and tectonic, far beneath the surface. "Then there's no time," he said. "I have to move tomorrow. You'll die on that track tomorrow. If Dorian consolidates power, you'll die," Kate repeated, very clearly. "And then it will not matter." Sebastian looked at her. The fire behind him threw his shadow long across the floor. Finn was asleep. Mara was pretending to be. The cottage held them all in its small, insufficient warmth, and outside, the valley was full of men looking for a king who was bleeding on a woman's hearth floor. "Why does it matter to you?" Sebastian asked. His voice was quiet, stripped of its usual control, a real question. "I am a stranger. I bring danger to your door. I put those children at risk, simply by being here. Why do you keep—" He stopped. Kate looked at him for a long, steady moment. "Because someone has to," she said simply. "And I am here." She went to check on the children. Behind her, she heard Sebastian sit back down, slowly, as if something had shifted in him that required a moment to settle. The fire crackled. The night pressed in around the walls, and somewhere in the valley, a man who wanted a throne was running out of patience. The second day broke gray and iron cold. Kate was up before the light, as she always was, moving through the cottage in the dark with the quiet efficiency of someone who had long ago made peace with mornings that offered nothing soft. She built the fire up carefully, measuring the wood. They were running low, another problem for another hour, and set water to heat and stood at the window watching the lane outside slowly separate itself from the dark. There were tracks in the snow that had not been there last night. Not riders. Foot tracks. Someone had come close to the cottage in the night, circled it, and gone away again. The prints were large, evenly spaced, deliberate. Not curious. Purposeful. Kate looked at them for a long moment, then turned around. Sebastian was already awake, already watching her. "I know," he said quietly. "How long?" "I heard them around the second hour of the night. One man. He wasn't ready to move yet. He was marking the location." His jaw tightened. "Dorian's scouts work that way. Find, mark, report. The riders will come today." Kate absorbed this without letting it show on her face. Then she went to the shelf above the hearth and took down the small tin box where she kept what passed for her savings. A collection of coins that represented months of traded remedies and carried firewood and done work that others had not wanted to do. She opened it, counted, and closed it again. "Mara," she said. The girl was already sitting up in her blankets, because Mara was always already sitting up. "Yes. I need you to take Finn to Petra's house on the north side of the lane. Do you know it? The one with the blue door." "Yes. Tell her I sent you. Tell her I said she would understand." Petra had offered kindness once. Kate was about to find out the weight of it. "Stay there until I come for you. Do not open the door to anyone else." Mara looked at her with those careful, ancient eyes. "What about him?" Kate glanced at Sebastian. "He's coming with me." "I'm coming with you," Sebastian said, in the tone of a man who had intended to say, "You're not going anywhere without me," and had caught himself. "Yes," Kate said. That's what I said. Mara woke Finn with the particular gentle efficiency she always used. A hand on his back, a low word, no alarm in her voice. Finn rose with the uncomplaining adaptability of a child who had learned early that mornings could require unexpected things. He pulled on his boots with great seriousness and held Mara's hand and looked at Sebastian on his way to the door. "Goodbye," Finn said to Sebastian, with considerable dignity for someone his size. Something moved through Sebastian's face. That fracture again, deeper this time. "Goodbye," he said, equally serious. And then they were gone, and the cottage was quieter. And Kate turned to Sebastian with the look she used when there was a great deal to do, and very little time in which to do it. "How much can you carry?" she asked. They left through the back. Kate took what mattered, the tin box, a knife, the small leather satchel of remedies she never went without, a coil of rope. She helped Sebastian into his coat, which she had cleaned and dried, but which still bore the stiffness of old blood at the seams, and she did not comment on the way his breath shortened when he pulled it across his left shoulder. The shepherd's track began behind the old mill at the edge of the village, where the trees grew close, and the snow lay undisturbed because no one came this way anymore. It was narrow, as Mara had said, barely a shoulder's width in places, the ground uneven beneath the snow, roots and stones hidden under the white. It curved west through dense pine, dropping gradually below the frost line where the snow thinned and the earth showed through in dark patches. Kate went first, testing the ground, and Sebastian followed 3 steps behind, close enough that she could hear his breathing, far enough that he was not leaning on her, which she understood was a matter of considerable importance to him. They moved without speaking. The forest was very still, that stillness that was not peaceful. They had been on the track for perhaps 20 minutes, when Sebastian said, low and without inflection, "Stop." Kate stopped. She heard it a half-second after he did, hoofbeats, but not on the track, parallel to them on the main road that ran along the valley's edge, moving fast, moving toward Ashvale. "They're going to the village," Sebastian said. "They'll find the cottage empty. And then they'll search outward." He paused. "They have dogs." Kate had not thought about dogs. She revised her timeline sharply downward. "How far to the point where they can't follow on horseback?" she asked. "An hour on this track, maybe less." "Then we move faster," Kate said, and did. It was not a clean hour. Sebastian was stronger than he had any right to be, given the wounds and the blood loss, and the 2 days on a cottage floor. He moved through the difficult terrain with a grim, controlled endurance that Kate recognized as the kind of strength that comes not from the body but from the decision not to stop. She had felt that kind before. She had lived on it, in various forms, for most of her adult life. But the shoulder wound was bleeding again by the time they reached the point where the track narrowed to almost nothing, squeezing between 2 great stones that would stop any horse. She saw the dark stain spreading through the coat and said nothing, because saying something would not stop it, and stopping was not an option. What she did was reach into her satchel without breaking stride and press a folded cloth against his side from behind, and he took it without comment and held it there, and they kept moving. The track opened eventually into a shallow dell, sheltered by the hillside, out of the wind. A frozen stream ran along one edge. Kate stopped here, breathing hard, and turned to assess. Sebastian looked gray. Not the gray of someone about to collapse. She had seen that. She knew the difference. But the gray of someone running on the last of a reserve that was not bottomless. "Sit," she said. He sat, which told her more than anything else could have about how much the last hour had cost him. She worked quickly, rebinding the shoulder, her cold fingers moving with a precision she insisted on regardless of the temperature. He was silent throughout, watching the tree line above them, never stopping watching. "They won't follow this far today," Kate said, pulling the last knot tight. "The dogs might track us to the stones, but the scent breaks up in the wind on this side. We have time." "How do you know about scent tracking?" Sebastian asked. "I grew up in this valley," Kate said. "I paid attention." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Tell me about the children." Kate looked up from her work. His eyes were still on the tree line, but she could tell the question was not casual. "Mara and Finn," she said. "Their mother was from a small pack 2 valleys east. She came through Ashvale last winter, sick and alone. I helped her through it, helped her as much as I could." She paused. "It wasn't enough. She lasted until spring. She asked me to take care of them before she went." "And the pack let you?" "The pack had nothing to say about it. They were not offering." She put her remedies back in the satchel. "Ashvale is not a cruel place. It is simply a practical one. 2 orphaned children with no bloodline claim were not a practical choice. I was not a practical choice. It seemed fitting." Sebastian turned to look at her then, fully, directly, the way he rarely looked at anyone. "The pack has treated you poorly," he said. It was not a question. "The pack has treated me the way people treat someone they don't quite know how to categorize," Kate said. "It's not the same thing. Isn't it?" She held his gaze for a moment. "No," she said carefully. "Cruelty requires intent. Ashvale mostly just looked past me. There's a difference." Sebastian was quiet for a long moment. Something was working in his expression, some calculation or recognition she could not quite name. "I have looked past people," he said slowly, as if the admission cost something. "As alpha. People on the edges of packs. People who didn't fit the expected shape." He stopped. "I told myself it was not cruelty, only efficiency." Kate looked at him. The dell was very quiet around them. The frozen stream caught the pale sky and held it. "And now?" she asked. "Now," Sebastian said. "I am lying in the snow being kept alive by one of the people I would have looked past." He said it without self-pity, simply the way she said true things. That changes the shape of the argument considerably. Kate stood, brushing snow from her knees. "Can you move?" "Yes." "Then we keep going. There's a woodcutter's shelter another hour west. We can rest there properly." She offered her hand. He looked at it for a half-second, that same unreadable moment, and then took it, using it to come to his feet with the careful, controlled motion she had come to recognize as his particular way of accepting help without surrendering to it. "Kate," he said, when he was standing. She looked up at him. This close, she was newly aware of the sheer presence of him. Not as a threat, not anymore, but as something large and complicated, and in the process of becoming something she did not yet have a word for. "Thank you," he said. Just that. No qualification, no condition attached. Kate nodded once and turned to the track. They were an hour from the woodcutter's shelter when the figure stepped out of the trees ahead. Not a rider, not a scout. A man on foot, alone, who had been waiting, she understood immediately, for exactly this. Who had known the track, known the dell, known the direction they would move. He was tall, lean, with Sebastian's darkness of coloring but none of his stillness. He moved like water moving, fluid and fast, and his eyes when they found Sebastian held something that Kate could only describe as satisfaction. "Brother," said Dorian, and smiled. The word hung in the cold air between them like smoke. "Brother." Kate stepped sideways, not back, not forward, but to the side, placing herself slightly off the direct line between the two men. It was instinct, the same instinct that made her check exits in unfamiliar rooms and keep her back to walls in crowded places. She needed to see both of them at once, and she needed to not be where either of them would expect her to be. Dorian's eyes moved to her briefly, the way a man's eyes move to a piece of furniture he is calculating whether to step around. Then they returned to Sebastian, with that smooth, settled satisfaction that Kate was already cataloging as one of the most dangerous things she had ever seen on a human face. Not rage, not desperation. Satisfaction implied confidence. Satisfaction implied a plan that was proceeding as intended. "You look terrible," Dorian said to Sebastian pleasantly, "though better than I expected, honestly. I had hoped the ridge would finish it." His gaze traveled to the bandaging visible at Sebastian's collar. "Someone has been taking very good care of you. Dorian." Sebastian's voice was flat and absolute, the voice Kate had not heard him use before. Not the careful, controlled tone of the past 3 days, but something older and harder beneath it. The voice of the thing he actually was. "This ends here." "It does," Dorian agreed warmly. "That's precisely what I came to tell you." He was not alone. Kate had already understood this, had understood it from the way he stood, unhurried, making no move to close the distance. Men who are alone do not stand that way. She looked at the tree line and counted shadows. 2 on the left, 1 elevated on the right, likely 1 more behind them that she had not yet located. 4, plus Dorian. Sebastian was standing, but barely. The hour of walking had taken the last of his reserve. She could see it in the set of his jaw, the way his left arm was held slightly away from his body to ease the shoulder. Kate thought very quickly. "You planned this route," she said to Dorian. He looked at her again, differently this time. Not furniture. A mild surprise. "The shepherd's track, yes. There are only so many ways out of Ashvale that avoid the roads." He tilted his head slightly. "You are the woman from the village, the one who dragged him out of the snow." "Yes," Kate said. "Brave," Dorian said, in a tone that made the word mean something else entirely. "And deeply inconvenient." "I've been called worse." Something flickered in Dorian's expression. Amusement, but the sharp kind. The kind that precedes a decision. "I have no quarrel with you. Step away from him and walk back to your village, and this is over for you." Kate looked at him steadily. "No." The amusement stayed, but something underneath it cooled. "You understand what you're refusing." "I understand exactly what I'm refusing," Kate said. "I'm refusing to step away from someone I chose to protect. I've done it before. I'll do it again. The size of the threat has never been the part that mattered to me." Dorian studied her for a moment with those flat, clever eyes. Then he made a small sound, not quite a laugh, and looked back at Sebastian. "Where did you find her?" "She found me," Sebastian said. What happened next happened fast, the way dangerous things always do. In pieces, each one decisive, with no space between them for reconsideration. Dorian made a signal with 2 fingers, barely a motion, and the shadows in the tree line moved. Kate had already identified the angles, and she moved with them, rather than against them, dropping low and driving hard toward the nearest figure on the left as he cleared the trees. She hit him at the waist with her shoulder. She was not large, but she was fast, and she had committed entirely, which counted for more than size in close quarters. And they went down together into the snow. His grip on his weapon broke when his arm hit the root beneath the surface. Kate was on her feet before he recovered. She did not look back at Sebastian. She trusted him to manage what he could manage. The elevated figure on the right was her next problem. She was already moving toward the slope when she heard Sebastian behind her, a sound that was not quite human, a depth and force of it that moved through the air like a physical thing. And the shadows on both sides of her stopped. Actually stopped. One of them stepped back. Kate reached the elevated figure before he had finished recalculating and relieved him of the short blade he had been reaching for, using the pivot her grandmother had demonstrated on her once, when Kate was 12, in the yard behind a house that no longer stood. The man was twice her size. He still lost the blade. She turned. Sebastian had not shifted. She had half expected, half feared it, had not known what she would do if the man on her hearth floor became something that redrew the world entirely. But he had not needed to. He was standing in the center of the small clearing, and the two remaining men were very still, and Dorian was no longer looking satisfied. For the first time since he had stepped from the trees, Dorian looked like a man whose plan had a flaw in it. "It's over, Dorian," Sebastian said. Quiet. Absolute. "You can't hold a seat you can't defend," Dorian said, but the warmth had gone out of his voice entirely, leaving something colder and more honest underneath. "You are bleeding and alone, and 2 days from your own territory. The council believes you are dead. You have already lied," Sebastian said. "To the council, to the allied packs, to everyone who trusted the word of our bloodline. That is what you have already done." He took one step forward, and despite everything, despite the wounds and the gray exhaustion and the torn coat, the step landed with a weight that seemed to compress the air. "And I am going to give you one choice, because despite everything, you are my brother, and I remember what that meant before you decided it was an obstacle." Dorian's jaw tightened. "Walk away," Sebastian said. "Leave the valley. Leave the territory. I will not send anyone after you. But you do not come back. You do not send riders. You do not make any further move against the seat or against anyone in this valley." He paused. "This is the only offer. It does not come twice." The silence was the longest Kate had ever stood inside. Dorian looked at his men, the ones who had stepped back, the one still sitting in the snow, the one whose blade Kate was holding. He looked at Sebastian. He looked, briefly and with an expression she could not fully interpret, at Kate. Then he turned and walked back into the trees. His men followed. The forest swallowed them and was still. Sebastian stood in the clearing for a moment that felt longer than it was. Then something in his posture changed. The weight of what he had been holding shifted, and Kate moved to him quickly and got her shoulder under his arm before he made the decision to refuse it. He did not refuse it. "The woodcutter's shelter," she said. "Can you make it?" "Yes," he said. And she believed him because his voice was still steady even if nothing else quite was. They walked the last hour slowly, without speaking much, the cold settling around them like a held breath finally released. The shelter was small, and smelled of old wood and pine pitch, and the ghost of 100 winters' worth of fires. Kate got a flame going in the iron stove in the corner, and sat Sebastian down on the low bench and checked the shoulder, and found it worse than she would have liked, and better than she had feared. She worked in silence for a while, and he let her, and outside the wind moved through the pines with that low, unresolved sound. "You didn't step away," Sebastian said. "No. He gave you a clear exit." "I noticed." "Kate." His voice had changed, not the flat, absolute tone of the clearing, not the careful, controlled tone of the cottage. Something stripped of all of it, quieter than either. "Why?" She tied off the last bandage and sat back and looked at him properly. "Because Mara and Finn needed someone to choose them when no one else would," she said. "And it turned out I was someone who could do that. And then you were in the snow. And it turned out the same thing was true." She met his eyes steadily. "I don't think it's complicated. I think some people are built to walk past, and some people are built to stop. I've always known which one I am." Sebastian looked at her for a long time. In the light from the stove, his face was clearer than she had yet seen it. The exhaustion honest in it, and something else beneath the exhaustion that she thought might be the specific expression of a man reassessing something he believed he understood. "I have spent 15 years deciding who was worth protecting," he said slowly. "Making those calculations from a distance, from a seat, from behind the authority of a title." He paused. I never considered that the calculation could work the other way. That someone might look at the Alpha King bleeding in the snow and make the same choice. The title was not visible, Kate said, just the heartbeat. Something in Sebastian's face moved. That fracture she had seen before, but fully this time, unhidden. I want to offer you something, he said, not as payment. I understand that you would find that offensive, and you would be right to. He stopped, seeming to search for the shape of what he meant. I have a seat that is still mine if I can return to it. I have a council that will need to be addressed, a territory that will need to be reassured. All of that is mine to handle. He looked at her. But Mara and Finn have no bloodline claim in any pack, in any territory. They are unprotected in any formal sense. He paused. I can change that, not as a transaction. As a consequence of what is true, they are yours, and you have demonstrated beyond any possible question that your protection is worth more than most things I could offer formally. Kate was very still. I am offering them a bloodline claim, Sebastian said clearly, under the king's recognition, recorded with the council, formal and permanent and belonging to no one's goodwill or patience. He held her gaze. They would be protected. Wherever they go, for their whole lives. Kate looked at the fire for a long moment. Outside, the wind had settled. The pines stood in the still cold, dark and patient and permanent. And Ashvale? She asked. I will speak to the council about Ashvale, Sebastian said. What has been looked past there will not continue to be looked past. I can promise you that. Kate was quiet for another moment. You should know, she said finally, that I am not coming with you because of any of that. I need to go back for the children, and then I need to see them somewhere safe. And I will not leave them in Petra's house indefinitely. I know, Sebastian said. I am not asking you to come. I am telling you that the door is open. Kate nodded once. She stood and went to the small window and looked out at the valley below, pale and white and absolutely still in the way that comes after danger passes, and the world has not yet decided what to do with the silence. Get some sleep, she said. We move at first light. They returned to Ashvale the next morning. Edric met them at the edge of the village. He looked at Sebastian for a long, reading moment, at the coat with its old blood stiffening the seams, at the bearing that no amount of wounding could entirely diminish, and something moved through Edric's face that Kate had never seen there before. Not deference, exactly. Recognition. He stepped aside and said nothing, which was the most significant thing he had said to Kate in years. Petra's house had a blue door and warm light behind the shutters. When Kate knocked, Mara opened it before the knock had finished, because Mara had been listening for footsteps, and Finn came past her at a run and wrapped both arms around Kate's waist with a force that nearly knocked her sideways. She held him for a moment with her eyes closed. When she straightened, she found Sebastian standing just behind her, looking at the two children with an expression that had finally, completely, lost its stone. Finn looked up at him. You're still alive? He said, with great satisfaction. Yes, Sebastian said. Thanks to your Kate. Finn considered this. She's good at that, he said seriously, and went back inside for his wooden horse. Sebastian stayed in Ashvale 3 more days, until the wounds allowed travel. On the last evening, Kate sat at her table with the candle lit, and listened to him speak to the council. All 12 of them, in the meeting hall. The same room where they had given her 2 days to solve a problem they had not wanted to touch. She sat in the back, and watched their faces change as he spoke. Watched the careful, practical people of Ashvale recalibrate everything they had assumed. And felt something settle in her chest that had been unsettled for a very long time. He did not perform for them. He did not command. He simply told the truth in the flat. Absolute tone she had come to know, and the truth was enough. When it was finished, Edric walked to Kate and stood beside her for a moment without speaking. Then he said quietly, "You knew." "Not at first," Kate said. "Just that he had a heartbeat." Edric was quiet for another moment. "We didn't make it easy for you. Here, the children, all of it." "No," Kate agreed. "I'm sorry for that," he said, simply, without performance. Kate looked at him. It was, she thought, the most honest sentence he had ever directed at her. She received it with the same careful weight she gave all honest things. "Thank you, Edric," she said. Sebastian left on a clear morning, cold and bright, the kind of day that makes the snow look like something intentional. He had men coming to meet him, loyal ones. The ones who had not known where to look until word reached them through channels Kate did not fully understand, but had helped to open. He stopped at her door before he went. "The recognition for the children will be registered within the month," he said. "You will receive the documents." "Thank you," Kate said. He looked at her. "You know the door is open." "I know," she said. He nodded once. Then he did something she had not expected. He looked past her, to where Mara and Finn stood just inside the doorway, Finn with his horse, Mara with her careful, ancient eyes, and he said to them, "You are well looked after. I hope you know that." Mara studied him for a moment. "We know," she said. Finn held up the wooden horse in farewell. Sebastian turned and walked down the lane, and the men waiting at the edge of the village fell in around him, and the pines closed behind them, and he was gone. Life in Ashvale changed in the ways that mattered, and stayed the same in the ways that were fine as they were. The documents arrived as promised, proper, formal, bearing a seal that made Edric's eyebrows rise when he witnessed them. Mara and Finn were no longer unprotected in any territory in the northern region. They were, in the formal language of the council record, recognized and named, with all that entailed. Mara read the document twice, very carefully. Then she folded it and put it in the small cedar box she kept under her bed. She did not make a speech about it. She came downstairs and stirred the porridge and said, without looking up, "Thank you, Kate," in a voice that carried the full weight of everything the document meant, and everything that had been done to make it real. Kate said, "You're welcome," and meant every syllable of it. Finn was more interested in the seal, which he spent an afternoon pressing into softened candle wax. He did not fully understand what the document meant, but he understood that Kate had made something safe, and that was enough for him, because it had always been enough. The pack looked at Kate differently after that. Not all of them, and not all at once, and it was not a transformation so clean and complete as stories sometimes pretend. But the looking past stopped. The conversations that had paused when she approached began to include her instead. Old Hessa brought a covered basket to the door one afternoon and set it on the step and said, without particular ceremony, "For the children," and left. It was not an apology and it was not nothing. Kate accepted it as what it was. Edric asked her, some months later, to sit on the council. She considered it for 2 full days. She was not someone who decided quickly when it mattered. And then said yes. She was practical enough to know that yes was the right answer. She was honest enough to know that she wanted it. A year after the morning Sebastian had walked down the lane and into the pines, a rider came to Ashvale with a letter. Kate read it at her table, with the candle lit, while Mara did her lessons, and Finn slept with his wooden horse tucked under his arm. The letter said that the council had been addressed, and the seat was secure, and Dorian had not been seen in any territory, had chosen, it seemed, the exile genuinely. It said that several things were being changed in the way the northern packs administered their obligations to unaffiliated members, and that Ashvale would receive formal standing in the regional council, and that there were other practical things being attended to that Kate would notice without necessarily knowing their origin. At the end, in handwriting that was careful and precise, and had clearly been revised at least once, the letter said, You told me that some people are built to walk past and some people are built to stop. I have been thinking about this for a year. I believe you were right. I am trying to learn to be the second kind. It is harder than leading. I think it is probably more important. The door remains open. Kate sat with the letter for a long time. Then she folded it carefully and put it away, and blew out the candle, and listened to the sound of her children sleeping in the room that had once been too small for one person, and had somehow, stubbornly, made room for everything that mattered. Outside, the forest stood in the dark, patient and full of old shadows, and the cold came down from the northern ridge the way it always had, carrying everything the valley needed to remember about endurance and waiting, and the particular courage of choosing to stop. Kate had stopped. And everything. All of it. The children and the documents, and the seat on the council, and the letter folded in the cedar box, and the pack that had finally learned to see her. Everything had grown from that single moment in the frozen dark, when she had heard a broken sound between a howl and a cry, and had chosen not to keep walking. She did not regret it. She never would.